Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. Later in the programme I'll be joined by two Oscar-winning actors and by a Nobel Peace Prize winner. But we begin with the Middle East, and in particular the stalled peace process between Israel and Palestine. In a few minutes I'll be talking to a leading Palestinian who played a major role in brokering the deal between the rival Palestinian factions. But we begin with Israel, whose Prime Minister made an important speech this week to the US Congress, and the speech was variously described as conciliatory by some and by the Palestinian President Abbas as a declaration of war on the peace process. So which was it? Well, to interpret the words, I'm delighted to welcome here today Israel's former ambassador to the UN, Dan Gillerman. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here, David.
So let's look in detail at that speech, if we may, and play some bits of it back, because Mr. Netanyahu's restatement of an earlier commitment to Palestine was one of the first things that he said.
2 years ago, I publicly committed to a solution of two states for two peoples, a Palestinian state alongside a Jewish state. I am willing to make painful compromises to achieve this historic peace.
Well, first question there, Dan. What might the painful compromises be? What could they be?
Well, David, first allow me just a second to voice my opinion about all these speeches we've heard in the last few days. We've heard two from President Obama, two from the Prime Minister. My biggest concern is that speech-making is replacing peacemaking, and that both leaders think that by making speeches they can actually substitute it for making peace. I don't know if you agree, but I believe that there are two things one shouldn't do in public: make love and make peace. In both cases, it's a good idea to have your eyes slightly shut and the light slightly dimmed.
The latter often takes longer than the former.
That's very true. But I think that what we need are less speeches and a secret, quiet, confidential negotiation which will lead us to an agreement, because what we are witnessing and what we're seeing right now is actually a press conference rather than a peace process. But having said that, the Prime Minister did state, and it's not the first time, that he is willing to make painful concessions. I believe that for Prime Minister Netanyahu, with his background and where he comes from, the mere acceptance of two states and a two-state solution as the solution is a compromise. But having said that, I believe he is ready to go much further and to actually give up some of the land which Israel holds at the moment, post-1967. So that would entail also evacuating some of the settlements, and that for Prime Minister Netanyahu, a revisionist who comes from the right, with his history and background, are indeed very, very painful concessions.
The second subject he brought up that we'd like to turn to now is the subject of the Jewish state. And here's what he had to say about that.
Because so far, the Palestinians have been unwilling to accept a Palestinian state if it meant accepting a Jewish state alongside it. You see, our conflict has never been about the establishment of a Palestinian state. It's always been about the existence of the Jewish state. This is what this conflict is about.
Now, this is a conflict, Dan, that maybe being dim here, but mystifies me. I don't understand why one side should worry about calling it a Jewish state, or that the other side should feel so berserk that it has to be a Jewish state. What is the difference in the wording?
Well, at the risk of disagreeing with my Prime Minister, David, I do not feel, both as an Israeli and as a Jew, that I need anyone's recognition of my Jewishness. And just as I do not think that any country in the world recognizes Britain as an Anglican state, I don't need anyone's recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. It is an independent, sovereign, democratic Jewish state called Israel. And I don't need recognition from the Palestinians.
Thank you very much for that. Well, now we move on to the fourth quote here, which is about borders. 1967 borders.
With such a partner, the Palestinian, or rather the Israeli people, will be prepared to make a far-reaching compromise. I will be prepared to make a far-reaching compromise. This compromise must reflect the dramatic demographic changes that have occurred since 1967. The vast majority of the 650,000 Israelis who live beyond the 1967 lines reside in neighborhoods and suburbs of Jerusalem and Greater Tel Aviv.
So there we have the situation about the compromise. And what about the borders issue? We've got the borders behind us on the screen, on the left, as it was in 1967, and 2011 as it is today. What do you think about the question of borders now? The very word, people have a little quiver about borders.
Well, David, if you look on the left side, if this were a lady, you would certainly admire her very narrow waist. But this is a country, and when you look at Israel at its narrowest, it's less than 10 miles. Israel is very vulnerable, and the 1967 borders are indeed very difficult to defend. However, I believe that what President Obama said and what the Prime Minister agreed to in a way is 1967 as a basis for negotiation, but with land swaps.
Next, Jerusalem must never be divided. That was basically the theme of this next quote, and we all know who said it. Here it is.
Jerusalem must never again be divided. Jerusalem must remain the united capital of Israel. I know this is a difficult issue for Palestinians, but I believe that with creativity and with goodwill, a solution can be found.
Quite a bit of creativity and goodwill going to be needed on this one, isn't it?
Well, you know, David, we discussed borders and we discussed the refugee problem. I think those are solvable. Jerusalem is indeed a very intricate question, simply because it is such a complex city and such a wondrous city and so dear to so many religions and so many people around the world. It's an incredible tapestry, and I believe that with goodwill, with creativity, and maybe with some divine goodwill as well, we can find a solution for Jerusalem as well. It is doable.
And creativity and goodwill from Mr. Netanyahu and to the Palestinians both. Yeah.
Yes, I think on all issues there'll have to be compromise, there'll have to be understanding, and quite frankly, I think the one missing ingredient which must be restored is trust. And we now have to restore trust between the leaders and between the people. And if we do that, we can go a very long way towards a fair and viable settlement.
And talking of viable settlements and so on, the next subject we turn to is when Mr. Netanyahu talked about the UN.
The Palestinian attempt to impose a settlement through the United Nations will not bring peace. It should be forcefully opposed by all those who want to see this conflict end. I appreciate the President's clear position on this issue. Peace cannot be imposed. It must be negotiated.
Was he saying that he didn't think that the UN had the right to admit a Palestinian state to the UN? It does have the right to do that, doesn't it?
The UN has a right to declare that the earth is flat. And if that had an anti-Israeli connotation, that resolution would probably be carried by the automatic immoral majority that exists at the UN. These are empty words because it is not the General Assembly of the UN that recognizes states, and by definition, the morning after, there will not be a Palestinian state. What it will create is a lot of bad will, maybe an eruption of violence, and therefore any unilateral motion would be very counterproductive.
Let's take a look at the subject of Hamas. We can predict, probably, even if we haven't watched it already, what Mr. Netanyahu had to say on this subject, but here it is.
So I say to President Abbas, tear up your pact with Hamas. Sit down and negotiate. Make peace with a Jewish state.
Presumably you would say that someday, and there would be dispute about this, but someday Israel probably will have to negotiate with Hamas. Maybe 10 years away, 5 years away, when they change their policies a bit?
Well, at the moment, negotiating with Hamas is really negotiating with your executioner about what form of execution you would prefer, or deciding on how best to commit suicide. Hamas is a terror organization dedicated and committed to the destruction of Israel. And therefore, I fully agree with the Prime Minister that there is no way that Israel can negotiate about its death with its hangman.
Hamas did win the election in Gaza, didn't it? It's very popular with somebody.
It did win the elections. It won. I would say that rather than Hamas, although it doesn't matter at the end of the day, winning the elections, Fatah lost the elections, but because of corruption. Hamas did very good work. The Palestinians messed up that election by having several candidates for the same, but it doesn't matter. They did win the election. But that does not mean that they are a legitimate force, and I think that most of the world today, including the European Union and the United States, regard it as a terror organization. And we will not negotiate with somebody whose declared aim is to wipe us off the face of the earth.
Dan, thank you. Thank you very much indeed for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, David. It's great to be with you.
So that's how senior Israeli, certainly one senior Israeli, interpreted the speech. But what about the Palestinian reaction? Let's go now to Beirut, where a leading Palestinian prime ministerial candidate, Munib al-Masri, has been at the bedside of his grandson, shot by Israeli troops during a protest on Israel's border with Lebanon a fortnight ago. Otherwise, he could have been here in London. But and I gather the news is indeed that your grandson is out of intensive care now.
Yes, Sir David, he's out of the intensive care. I told him I'm coming to talk to you, and he told me to say hello to you.
Well, that's very nice, and please return the greetings as well. And that protest march where he was shot and so on, it was said in all the papers that it was in fact unarmed.
Completely unarmed. He and maybe 30 or 40 students from the American University of Beirut, with thousands of unarmed Palestinians who are very much interested to see their homeland from a distance, which they did.
Mr. Netanyahu, earlier on in his speech, said that he was willing to make painful compromises. Do you believe him?
I wish I could. I wish I would like to, but I don't know where are these difficult compromises that he's doing. I think the Palestinians are the one who are making very hard compromises since Oslo, since 1993. But I would like to hear Mr. Netanyahu's hard compromises that he's making, which I really don't believe him.
And in fact, President Abbas said that it was a declaration of war on the peace process by Mr. Netanyahu. You would tend to agree with that, would you?
Yes, I think President Abbas did all what he could. He's been trying for the last so many years, I think so many, probably since Oslo, trying to genuinely and strategically to make peace with Israel. But I think Israel is far away from making peace. It looks like they don't want peace. They want land, but they don't want peace. I hope that more Israelis will voice their voices. They will have their voices against what Mr. Netanyahu is trying to do. Some of Israelis, they want peace, of course. The Palestinians wanted peace a long time ago from Arafat's time.
Prime Minister Netanyahu's concern for security, he rejected President Obama's plan to use the 1967 borders and so on with appropriate land swaps as a starting point for talks. Why did he reject that, do you believe?
Because Sir David, I think Mr. Netanyahu has to come to himself, and he has to say, I cannot eat the whole cake and eat it. Like he wants the whole cake and eat it. It cannot be done. Mr. Obama nicely, and we want to thank him. I want to thank him for the first time a president of the United States say 1967 border is the border that we are talking about. But Israel, they never wanted to declare where is their border with Jordan, their border with Palestine, and their border with Egypt. This is a step in the right direction to say where is the border of Israel, 1967 border of 1967 border with Israel. That's what we want to ask Mr. Netanyahu. Please define the Israeli border or Israel border.
And also, Mr. Netanyahu also said that Jerusalem must never again be divided. I know that it's a difficult issue for Palestinians, which is putting it mildly, but I believe that with creativity and with goodwill, a solution can be found. On Jerusalem, will there be enough creativity and goodwill to go round?
I don't think he means what he's saying. What goodwill? We have given, the Palestinians gave all the goodwill in the world to see that a just state, a Palestinian state, living side by side in a peaceful way with Israel. But it looks like Mr. Netanyahu doesn't want that. Mr. Netanyahu must remember that the State of Israel was created by the United Nations resolutions in 1947, 48. This was the resolution which was passed during that year to create the State of Israel. It looks like in 1967 there was a resolution which called it Resolution 242. That's why the Palestinians accepted 242, which called for 1967 border, and it called for East Jerusalem as the capital of the Palestinian state and the right of return to the refugees, the Palestinian refugees. It's a United Nations resolution. We cannot play with it. Israel was created by the United Nations resolution. We would like to be treated the same way from Israel.
But I mean, what about that, the right of return, as you say, which Netanyahu rejects, despite what was said about it in 1967 and so on? Given what we hear from Mr. Netanyahu and so on, is there any hope of a peace settlement that will allow a right of return for more than a handful of Palestinians, really?
Sir David, we know what Mr. Netanyahu does not want. But what Mr. Netanyahu wants, please ask Mr. Netanyahu what he wants so that we'll see that we want to talk. We know everything that he doesn't want. But what does he want? Why the Palestinians cannot have a state? We should have a state because I think this is the last occupation, the worst occupation of the world, which is the Israeli occupation on the Palestinian territory. We want independence. We want our state. We want to be free. And the Palestinians have worked so hard to earn their freedom. And we hope that the world could appreciate this. And I hope that America could help us to do that.
And you obviously were very involved in bringing about the rapprochement between the West Bank and Gaza, between the traditional Palestinians and Hamas. Do you feel that Mr. Netanyahu would ever, he says he would never, I was saying he may have to one day, do you think he will, or his successor will have to and will negotiate with Hamas?
Yes, I mean, also, Mr. Netanyahu, when Fatah and Hamas were divided, when the country was divided, always Mr. Netanyahu and other countries say, to whom shall we talk? To Hamas or to Fatah? Because Mr. Netanyahu said, I don't know to which side shall I talk. So when we are united, now Fatah and Hamas have one voice, one address. Mr. Netanyahu say, we cannot have Hamas. If you want, Mr. Abbas, if you want peace, you have to get rid of Hamas. Hamas is the integral part of the Palestinian fabric. They won the election, and they are part of the Palestinian community. And I think the rapprochement or the reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas is to the interest of the national interest of Israel's security and the world security. And also, I'm surprised at Mr. Obama's saying that it is not to the interest of the world to have Fatah and Hamas getting together. I think also the president is not reading us very well, because this is the best thing that happened is the reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas. One voice, one address, and we hope that the new government that is going to be formed is going to be a strong government that will abide with international law and with United Nations Charter and United Nations resolution. So a government will be accepted by the whole world.
And will that government, Palestinian government, when it comes to pass, will it have your good self as the Prime Minister? Lots of people are saying it will. You've turned down the idea of the Prime Ministership in the past. You wouldn't turn it down this time, would you?
Sir David, it is not on my agenda. There are tens of Palestinians, maybe hundreds of Palestinians who can be qualified. It's not in my agenda, but I will support any Prime Minister that's coming. I will support Mr. Fayyad, because I think Mr. Fayyad has done a good job. He's done a very good job, and I wish him, he has a heart problem in Texas, and I wish him good recovery.
Well, thank you very much indeed. You didn't totally reject the idea there of being the next Prime Minister of Palestine. You didn't embrace it, but you didn't totally reject it. But we do thank you anyway hugely for being with us today. It's been a pleasure. We hope that the recovery of your grandson continues, and we thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sir David. All the best for you and for Al Jazeera.
In a minute, I'll be talking to Oscar winners Cuba Gooding Jr. and Vanessa Redgrave, and indeed to Nobel Peace Prize winner Muhammad Yunus. All of that after this short break.